All right, everybody, I think we're ready to get started. Thank you all for coming, for those who can make it. Hopefully we have some more people that might pop on to the virtual attendance, kind of get some time in on this. As we've been discussing for the past few meetings, we've been going over our execution plans as a group. Everybody's presenting what they have and what they use normally, or try to use at least. And we've come up with the idea of kind of compiling all these together into one master BIM execution plan that we can all use as a template to get started from. Jason's been working on it. Jason from TVS. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today. He's got his little boy is very sick, so he's out. Stay out with him today. So then we have Nate, who'll be sitting in and kind of going over what Jason has gotten together so far. And then I think after we discuss that, and once we get through with that, if we have some time, Nate has actually come up with a really good idea about setting up future schedules for these meetings ahead of time, 6 months, going in and figuring out who the host is going to be, what we're going to kind of be talking about. That way it'll be a little easier, have it a little more organized, as opposed to last-minute invites getting sent out, making sure everybody received it and everybody's able to make it. So I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Nate. And,
Thanks. Well, I wrote this, like Omar said, it was a last-minute kind of change in cast. So after I heard Jason was sick, or his kid was sick this morning, I kind of did this last minute. So if there are any changes or suggestions, please feel free. Jason and I talked about, and we talked about last meeting, the need to instill a little more organization and pre-planning in the meetings, stay a little more focused on our ultimate goal, which we had previously decided to be to have a BIM plan template that everybody can use. So I gave it a stab to write out a goal and a mission based on sort of what I've gathered in last meetings. And this is pretty quick, and we can talk about this or just keep it ongoing, or maybe this just gives you a little background info. But more or less, I think it's to gather the collective knowledge of all our disparate corners of the industry. That's been what's useful so far, at least I think. And the mission, like I said, is really to develop the BIM execution plan template. And we've actually started doing that. But when I started writing this down, it occurred to me that, and I'll show you the comparison between the other plans in a second, but it occurred to me that everybody's got a plan already, and there's some pre-existing plans out there. So I was hoping that we could kind of talk a little bit about why we don't use pre-existing plans or why we would want a new one, so that we can be specific about a goal and a mission of why this plan wants to be different. I know in the past we've referenced the Penn State BIM execution plan. Has anybody not looked at that? It's the big one that if you Google BIM execution plan, it pops right up. But it's like, it's a novel.
Which one is that?
The Penn State Smart Building Alliance. Tons of.
I've got a copy of that on my desk right now.
So, I'll go first and just say that we don't use that because it's a little too broad, too much information. It is just so thick and hard to get your mind wrapped around.
Well, it's more of a how do you write it? This is how you should go about writing one, not a template per se.
Well, there are two parts to it, but you're right. It's full explanation, right? But and then we have our own template, but I know it needs work, and our TVS specifically would be interested in what all the other disciplines need from a plan when we hand it out to everybody. We know what we need. Is that the consensus of the group? Is that fair to say, or does anybody have any other?
I would agree.
I think what my understanding is, of the difference between what ours could be, or maybe should be, is that it does incorporate not just an all. Each plan, like you have a plan between ARC and subconsultant. You have a plan between ARC and contractor. There's variations between the different parties, and there's different needs, depending on who the plan is with, who's involved in the project. Not all projects are going to have, a need for this giant execution plan. So I think, in my mind, I think an ultimate goal would be to have this electronic that's got sort of drop-down, menus depending on, answering questions, and then you get a different menu based on some of those questions answered. Just thinking out loud and in a broad sense, but that's my 2 cents, I guess.
Are you saying similar to writing the specifications where you can either have a deductive method or sort of a question and answer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you sort of get different options based on those responses. Yeah.
I mean, it could be yours.
But you could also do it on the front of a business execution plan. Usually there's a project directory. If you fill values in there, it will turn on, or it will turn sections on or off. So if you put an electrical subcontractor in there, so everything that's related to electrical subcontractors will pop up. Or if you don't have it, it just doesn't appear. I think that would be useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more of a question. I mean, like I said, it would definitely be useful, and it would definitely make things a lot easier. Of course, execution, how to come about this. But then, what is in those fields that are going to be popping up or not showing up? I think that's more of what we should focus on in the early stages.
Sure.
And then, all right, now once we've got all this, how do we execute it in a what's the most efficient way to execute all these things, or estimate them, or utilize?
Would you have a different scale plan for different severity of BIM collaboration? Has anybody ever done that? We do that. Like if everybody's just using Revit, that's one thing. If everybody's planning on using plots protection, that's another. If we're taking it through operations, it's a full-blown BIM plan gets a lot thicker.
We've seen others in the industry put in different, they refer to them as ComSpec, but it's like a different chapter, different section for each additional service that's going to be offered, or basic requirements. I mean, the whole idea of doing a deductive method or a question and answer where you basically outline what different fields that you want to cover, and then you can do it with a spreadsheet where I guess it would be able to bring in different fields that would ask you more and more questions. But I think the ideal situation would be to have one of these specification programs that someone has written that knows how this method kind of works. But I mean, that would be within probably a third party or like an architectural office, just based on whatever their day-to-day is now.
Yeah.
See how they write their specs today, whether it is deductive or whether it's question and answer, and if it is question and answer, how they go about it.
Mm-hmm.
You guys?
I was just curious about that and how it relates to eSpecs, because that's pretty much how eSpecs work. I mean, you go into a database and you have a drop-down menu and you can select what sections you want to start using, and all the information that follows with that specific section now fills in.
Well, I guess that's how eSpecs works. It's a structured database. You check pieces and parts you want to include. My experience with BIM execution plans have been sometimes I don't have a standard one because I'm using the owner's provided template, or to me, the first parts of BIM execution plans are fairly boilerplate. It's really sort of who the players are and what the contact information is. But the real meat of the BIM execution plans, I have yet to do two that were even in the same ballpark, because of all the variables of what is your contract delivery method? Is it design bid build? Is it design build? Is it CM at risk? Those all have a big impact on who comes to the table when, and who's providing what information when. So that gets, I don't know how you would standardize that. That gets complex quick and different in every one I've done so far, because they've all had a different delivery method. And the back end of what an owner may be requiring or not can greatly impact complexity of how you map out who does what, when, how, and who takes it over and who hands it off to whom and who's responsible for the data when. All of that gets very customized on a project-by-project basis. So I don't know how you start to do that without building a huge set of things that you can select and try to weave together. So again, the front ends are fairly straightforward. It's when the rubber hits the road, you're really trying to figure out who's going to do what, when, and how. And is the architect going to be responsible for certain data up to a point, and then the contractor takes it over? Does it come back? Are you using COBE? Are you using some other proprietary or specialized spreadsheet? I mean, I've seen data spreadsheet delivers that are different for different GSA entities. The VA has their own spreadsheet.
Yeah.
That's a component-based spreadsheet that has nothing to do with COBE. There's Georgia Tech's using a COBE, and they have they're trying to generate data to go into an AIM facility management system. Other GSA entities and institutional entities are wanting different things. And where you wind, it's almost like you have to write these things backwards from where you want to wind up, backwards into what's meaningful. And you can do a lot of standard Pennsylvania State flow diagrams, but they may have nothing to do with what you're trying to get to. They may just be, because a lot of them I've looked at, it's like, yeah, that's all great. That's what you're doing, but from one project to the next, you may not be doing any of that flow diagram. So
if it was set up like a question and answer scenario, though, where you input, say, project delivery method and
right, and that may
phases involved, then are we capable on the technical level of creating a program that sorts through all that? And then are we capable of creating all possible scenario or all possible number of chapters or items that we can think of? I don't know the technical side of it. I would say.
Yeah, the technical side would probably be the hardest. I don't know anybody here a computer programmer? That would, to me, would be the hardest thing to get, things across. I think creating all the possible, I don't know if scenarios would necessarily be the thing to shoot for, but maybe all the possible chapters and items that would be required. And then, you can have the subcategory of whatever, and then you manually fill in the specifics.
Because it is a template.
Exactly.
It's not intended to be something that fills out all the information.
Yeah, it's not, you just go in, put our names, our project, and hit enter, and we have an execution plan.
Right.
It's not that. I wish it was that.
we should have a contact list.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we could coming up with all the possible, categories, subcategories, topics.
So we're talking about
would
like
be possible, I think, between all of us.
like an a la carte chapter.
I guess so. I mean, we might have certain things that we have seen our standards throughout as far as within those. Like I said, we do have the entire front end is all boilerplate, so we could have all those in there with, just specific lines where we adjust according to whatever specific project we're working with. And then once we get into the further details or deeper in, then, we might have specific items with the general intro or general topic, and then we manually enter in any specifics according to, the specific project needs. But then at that point, we would need to have at least a functioning prototype, so to speak, of the software so we could actually see how well this would work. Okay, we've got all these. I'm going to go through real quick. I'm going to select all these, and then I'm going to start manually entering my specific information. And like I said, that's going to be I say hardest, but it really isn't. I mean, we do have resources here. I'm sure you have some PhD students who'd be more than happy to have fun with this, and like, hey, guys, we want to do a project for you.
That's what we need. Get some interns.
Yeah, we do have to. There are people that we could probably reach out to that might be able to take on the technical side of it. Of course, before we do that, we actually have to give them something to work from, so we're going to have our, ideas kind of straightened out to a certain extent.
What you might do is start thinking of it as maybe in layers of because it tends to work by phase of project. So that could be a layer of phase. You could have participants involved at each phase, because you might have contractors, subcontractors involved at earlier or later phases, depending on how the delivery method is worked. So you could have, a BIM execution plan template might first look at a layer of phases, what parties are involved at each phase, and then a layer of what are modeling requirements, a layer of what are data requirements at each phase, responsibilities of each phase. So maybe a layering of sort of cross-referential information. I could say that very well, but
Well, I think what you're saying is that the BIM, the building information model evolves
right.
throughout the process.
Yeah.
So you have to tailor to fit the evolution.
But we have that the experiment that we made with all the inputs and outputs and how the information flows. We have all that information compiled. Everybody took their own and according to their trade, whether you're an architect or an electrical. So everybody put, well, for this phase, I need this information. My output is this. And we have that all that compiled. I don't know, Tate, what state you have that, and what state you have that.
I don't quite know either. I wasn't handling it, but I know that that's what this is.
Yeah, the pictures.
But we could use that as a framework. It's already done by phase. Like I said, you can go deeper and deeper depending on what the delivery is. But it's already organized. So.
Well, we have that in a mind map electronically. So we probably, is that what you're pulling up right now?
I don't even know what's in this folder. It's not a virus.
Well, I remember looking at that, and it lined up pretty well with the Georgia Tech BIM execution plan. I mean, I presented, for those of you that weren't there last month, I presented on what the Georgia Tech DEP template is, and there was some good feedback from the room about how that compares and contrasts with what you guys use. But I thought, we had that kind of mapping by phase and responsibilities. I mean, I don't know if that's kind of what you're referring to. And also, I wanted to put the question out for those that actually have worked in that BIM standard, because I've been talking to people. Now I see people that have actually went through the few guinea pigs here in the room that have worked on this, basically, how that has helped you, or if that really is kind of outside of what you guys would normally do. Because when I talked last month, some guys were saying that this actually didn't go into as much detail as you would want to do for yourselves. So some firms would actually have their own BIM execution plan and just kind of do this one just because that's what Georgia Tech wants to see. But really, they would want to go into further detail and do things kind of more of an internal process, like who within the firm has certain responsibilities and roles. So, so I don't know if a template that you guys are developing would be something that would try to replace something that we have, or something that the owner would want to see too, or would be still that internal one where at the end of the day you still want to do this for an owner if they have one. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, we've gone through and we've sort of filled it out. It's kind of a higher tier of understanding, and as far as getting down into subcontractor levels, we have a separate set, or not a separate set of, not completely separate set of execution plans, but more just some criteria that we have that they need to meet, and it's purely to make sure that they meet the requirements that we have as a general contractor. So, I mean, this sort of addresses some of the relationships between design team and contractor, but it doesn't between contractor and subcontractor.
Exactly.
So we had to go through and refine that.
Okay. Now, did you find that once you did that, what happens like in an IPD process? Do you have any documentation or any way to show this is how subcontractor would deal with a consultant, for example?
I don't believe we've dealt with an IPD. This is not an IPD process. Design bid build? Yeah. So we will only find that out when we kind of get there. I mean, in a sense, you can tie it all together. But I mean, the way that I see what this group's trying to develop is somewhat paralleling what's currently done and then once owners find that it matches what their needs are, they would sort of transition into that way of understanding or that. So like this would sort of fall away once a new execution plan that was improved and more sophisticated came into play. But it would become an issue of acceptance and adoption by owners.
I mean, in reality, part of what we're trying to do here by creating this master template is not just for us. It's something that we want to disseminate out to the owners. So they can maybe start incorporating it that way. You know, when they come around to getting their projects going, whoever they reach out to, we're going to have a basic understanding of where they're coming from already. So no matter who the owner is, no matter who the GC, no matter who the engineer is on the project, they're going to have, like I said, same general understanding.
And that gets down to an important point. Like these don't necessarily cover every aspect. So in a lot of times you actually have to go through and change line items or take certain things out. I mean, much the way you would with an AA document. So whatever is created would have to have that capability of being able to be overridden or have amendments or whatever tied in.
Capacity, something. Yeah, and I agree, definitely.
I mean, this is a much more formal process that's being proposed in the sense of the scale is much larger within the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just a local or people adopting it within this room.
Yeah.
Getting large companies involved that will take it on.
Yeah.
As far as anyone knows, there is no like AIA document that's a DEP template yet or anything, because you'd be amazed of how much the AIA has put out and all these different organizations for like project checklists and forms like a transmittal forms. I mean, it's all these forms that the AIA has come out with, and I see and other organizations, like the BRIC Institute has like standards of how to do all these different things. So maybe it's the long-range idea that we're talking about is that we're an organization that will come out with a template maybe that gets referred to and then gets adopted. Because, yeah, it would be kind of reinventing the wheel if every owner, if every university comes out with their own weird little standard. Like, it'd be nice if somebody says, oh, well, we've adopted the standard by this so-and-so institute that's kind of like, accepted now industry-wide or whatever. But as far as the AIA has not come out with anything like that.
E202 is as close as they get. That's really more contractual.
Exactly.
Smart Alliance is probably the closest thing to some industry-wide reference that I'm aware of. But
and they do have the E203 now. Did everybody, I emailed that out to the
Yeah, I haven't had a chance
list.
to
I
look
don't
at
know
it.
who was on it. But it is a much more expanded version of 202.
Okay.
And it's a family of documents. One of them being the new E202, and then the others being, I think, more about process. But it's not a BIM plan. I think maybe that AIA probably realized it's out of their jurisdiction too. I mean, I think there's the sky's the limit. I mean, but that's something we really have to establish with this group. I mean,
Well, let's provide the structure. Like I said, provide the outer layer.
well, what I liked about where you were going with it was that you're starting to base the organization on things that you have in your contract. And everybody in the room has a contract, and that's where you start with, hopefully. Some of them didn't know that. So you can establish phases, a schedule, maybe even a timeline, and deliverables. So if you organized it by phase, those would be your first inputs. And then your schedule, that is your schedule. But then at the end of every kind of phase volume, there would be deliverables. And those deliverables in the BIM plan would coincide with contractual deliverables.
Maybe if it is along a timeline, it's just so that once those deliverables are defined, then they become locked in so that the next set of deliverables can be edited by someone further downstream without it actually impacting what's already been agreed upon.
And you guys require a BIM plan to be submitted at every phase, right? That's kind of the idea there, is that you kind of say, this is how we did it, now we're going to move from this, not, we're going to build on top of this, not pre-schedule everything.
one thing I've found is it really does need to be considered a living document because not all the players are at the table when you start this process. And I've found on many teams that players come to the process, there's an assumed process, much like there was on our Georgia Tech project. The players came to the table, had varying levels of ability to deliver that, and the process had to be adjusted to fit the capabilities of the different parties. And in some cases, a new process invented or, offered up, or in one case. But so it's good to think of them as living documents that will be revised at every phase as new players come on board, as subcontractors come on board, as commissioning agents come on board, which, typically won't be there at the beginning of the project. So I think that evolution is important, sort of a mindset to keep as well. Because I've yet to see one that didn't evolve. And you start off general, and as the need arises, or as the project program and develops, you're going to drill down deeper and deeper into more and more specifics. And depending on the client, that may be provided up front, it may not. You may be trying to extract it from the client as to what they really want out of this. Because they'll just say they want everything, but everything is a lot. When you give them everything, they're like, oh, well, I didn't want 7,000 of everything. That's a little overwhelming. So I think the framework is good too, but I think it should be the biggest misconception I've run into is that this is something you came around at the beginning, and everybody runs with it. It never happens. There's just too much that you don't know at the beginning that you'll find out as you go along.
Well, that will always go back and influence your scope of services and your comment on any particular teammate's ability or not to deliver the information is pretty profound. I mean, you could get a third of the project team in a conversation and say, well, I don't have any of that stuff. So, what do you do with
Right, so it starts affecting fees and additional services and for all parties as to how they may accomplish something.
Does anybody else have experience with clients asking you to include BIM plan or Revit models or anything BIM related in their contract? I know it's been getting more on the forefront, and people have been pressing us more to include that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're trying to include that language in our agreements when we're aware that there is potentially a need out there. And as Sam's suggesting, it's, well, we don't know yet because we just don't know.
Yeah.
And that's pretty challenging.
It definitely seems to be more on the institutional side and the government side. I haven't really, at least in the hospitality studio, we haven't had any requests.
Right.
Right. It's like, we don't care, just deliver it.
We have had, I don't know if we've actually had any written into the contract. I do know that when the clients come and they give us their list of deliverables or their execution plan or what they deem to be their execution plan, that's usually been on the forefront. There's been BIM model of some sort. I mean, it's actually kind of funny because you look at it further, you read the next line, and we're at use of BIM information, and they literally say don't know. They know they want it, they just haven't really figured out why they want it. So I guess maybe that's why it's not so much including contracts and things like that, because they're like, okay, it sounds good. We've heard a lot of people talk about BIM, but do we really need it? Well, just in case, let's go ahead and ask them for it.
Yeah, because they don't know if they want it for documentation purposes, or remodeling later, or for facility management.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what. They just don't want to be without it.
Right. But if they're getting something that isn't going to fit what they would want to use it for later on.
And I mean, once they ask, I mean, that's one of the things that I like to ask is, once I see that they're asking for it, sit down with somebody and find out why do you think you want it? What have you heard? And I can either agree to it or clarify misconceptions, because a lot of people do have a lot of misconceptions about it. A lot of people think they can get a Revit model, they plug it into whatever facility management software they have, and they can walk around with an iPad, and they can see live data and push this, and it's going to tell me that they need to replace place now, and if they get an alert in their system, it's going to tell them. So, you clarify those misconceptions.
Yeah.
Well, we've probably had, in general, many projects that just required a BIM model in general with no specifics, and generally they just want to facilitate the transference of that to a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, we've only had 2 contracts, Georgia Tech, that had specific requirements in the contract by reference to other documents, and a GSA client as well. But those have been the only 2.
And the reference was to Penn State or IU or some of those other.
No, it was to Georgia Tech BIM standards.
To your
Georgia
standard,
Tech BIM
okay.
template. Now theirs were developed off those others, I believe.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
But
So
they
it's
had
like
their
a
own
double
specific.
reference.
So, but in that instance, you're obligated by contract to follow the Georgia Tech template. Or you're just obligated to
Use their
collaborate
template.
using it.
And with their template, we've used it as a starting point, and there have been parts of it that have been changed to not apply to our project. There have been a lot of stuff added to it where it was lacking detailed information that we had to ferret out.
Yeah, I mean, an example is you attached the E202 to it, 202, right? Yeah, to it to really show all that,
We've
the level of
attached,
detail and all that.
Table 23 from Kobe as we ferreted down the components they wanted, and none of that was ever in the original plan. So and again, I can see that, again, with several projects that the other one that was contractual and just other projects that we're looking at, seeing it sort of all over the place a little bit as to where it's going to wind up right now. And working with another client who's received stuff but come to the mindset that they need to figure out what they really want out of it. So even though they've received some BIM models, they're now working through a process of trying to determine, well, what is it that we want, and how are we going to put that in requirements, and how are we going to set up standards and our own template so that we start getting information in a consistent manner, so that when we have 20 projects, we're not looking at 20 different BIM execution plans to try to find out where that piece of information lives. So I'm not sure what I was originally responding to at this point, but
Still a complex situation.
Yeah, and the other part that's going to happen is, Jim's, you weren't there, but your conversation this morning, your presentation, you start with a design model and end up with an implementation model. Which one's actually the one that gets delivered? And what information falls out of the design model and does not make it into the implementation model, or what part of
Mobile construction model.
right implementation construction? Yeah.
and many call for concurrent models, and design models become record models, and construction models become as-built models. Georgia Tech's BEP is written for concurrent modeling. And, there's reasons for that, too. I mean, the biggest I've found is MEP, because you want to maintain the original mechanical engineer's design intent model, because who's worked on a project yet where the MEP, where the mechanical sub didn't redesign the whole system around products that were picked that were different than products that were used by the MEP engineer.
Right.
And so the owner might want to have a original design basis model and an as-built model in case the as-built for some reason doesn't perform as expected. They might want to go back and compare to the original design intent of that mechanical system. So you wind up with lots and lots of models and lots of data coming from different places. And the BIM implementation plan for the Georgia Tech project has just been trying to say this stuff's coming from this model, this stuff's coming from another model, and it all gets put together somehow at the end.
Doesn't the text call for the contracts to model separately, and that the content that changes during the construction process gets sent back upstream to the design?
That was my understanding. At least I think maybe that has been layered onto projects now. Like it may not say it here yet, but then that's what we then asked for and have talked about after this. I think because we want, especially Georgia Tech, we use the information in different ways. So the reason why we want the design model updated to reflect as-built conditions is because we have in-house architects that will then, on renovations, on small renovations, we would want to use the model in-house ourselves. So we want it to be updated to reflect what's really there.
So it's really a one principal model, and that's the design teams, because that's where the reliability and responsibility is. But anything that happens during construction is like for information only, for anybody that wants to go back and reference it if need be.
I wouldn't necessarily say that, no. It may wind up being that way, but I wouldn't say as a blanket statement it's always that way.
Right, no, I'm just talking specifically about what I think Tech's looking for.
Well, and I think the construction model would have the COBE data embedded in it, and then that's what gets fed into the facility management system.
Yeah.
So that's where that's really valuable. But that gets used by a whole different department, not me. That's why it's so funny when we say Georgia Tech, but actually I only want this portion of it. The guy in the other building wants it the other way, but as far as you guys are concerned, it's Georgia Tech that wants it this way in different ways.
Well, that's the challenge with a client like Georgia Tech is you really have two end deliverables and two clients.
Yeah.
You have a physical plant, and you have the planning design side.
Right.
And what y'all each want and need out of that is completely different. So that starts to outline a lot of how you manage that end result in the BEP and how you outline how you get there.
Okay, so you guys saw that in your construction model, you just input all the COBE data in there so that was to one deliverable to one department?
No, it's much more complex than that. If it were that easy.
Right. And I guess what phase you guys on now is DD?
DD.
Yeah. So
And we're still sort of working through how it's all going to happen. And the BEP is still changing and evolving today. And still not sure where the general contractor stands on certain aspects of that. But we've had to develop ways of extracting data, supplementing data, re-inputting data back. It's more of a circular process. And looking at external software to help make that happen.
Is it, what is it, Ecodomus? Is that one of the options you guys are looking at?
No. Well, you're using AIM as your facilities. Right. We're looking at BIMLink as a data management third-party software. It allows you to extract data from the model into a spreadsheet format. It maintains the user ID, component element IDs, so you can type in additional data that can then be loaded back into the model. Huh?
You wrote that.
Yeah.
Which is the one that you were referring to earlier?
Same thing.
ID family.
Okay.
The problem, though, is the read-only parameters that are in Revit that you can't update back and forth. You have to create your own parameters when they're read-only parameters. You can't.
Yeah, we've had to create a lot of project parameters. Right. And there's a lot of project parameters created in the Georgia Tech templates.
But your uniform on the class, all those are read-only. You can't update those outside and then bring those back.
Right. COBE has a lot of data that's required that, you can't easily even create in Revit. It has to live outside the model. So there's that complexity too. So there's a want, need, and desire, and then there's been a lot of pain in trying to figure out how this piece of data gets from here to here to here to here and winds up here. And this piece of data, well, there's no place for it here. So it has to come into the process somewhere in the middle and get captured and still delivered in a way that can be uploaded into AIM, into your facility management software. And in my experience, that's where all of this breaks down, is that nobody's BEP is addressing that level of granularity.
Yeah.
And that's really what, in the end, you're trying to do. I mean, the BEPs are all up here. You're trying to figure out a process that's down here in the weeds.
Workflows.
Who's going to enter that, and who's responsible for it? And is it data tied to a submittal process of the contractors? Is it spatial data that the architect's responsible for? Is it, you know, and
How are you guys going about data collection on site? I think you said you're in DD, so probably nothing going on, but how does it attend it? Yeah. Because what we've seen is the capability to use some of the tablets to do data collection, and then that helps populate COBE spreadsheets.
it seems like a lot of the data is really just it's going to come out of the submittal process. It's not going to be in the field, unless you're talking about barcoding or something.
Yeah, yeah, or
Commissioning?
things get switched out right at the last minute. You know, whether a submittal says one thing and then perhaps the equipment is changed after that, then they have to go and do data collection.
Of course, I guess serial numbers would be field data,
yeah,
specific, so that would be useful there. You know, how do we do that? It's, you know, in this one we're still figuring it out. On our GSA project, it was a design build. The contractor basically hired us, paid us lots of money to go do data entry, which was painful in and of itself, but that's how it got done. But that's easier to do in a design build contract when you're working for the contractor. It's much harder to do in a more conventional process, right, to determine who's responsible for it. So, again, every project has been different. And it all very much had a lot to do with the contractual delivery method, relationships of who worked for who, who is my contract with versus someone else's contract, what are you trying to get out of this, where are you trying to wind up.
This is where the tailoring of the BIM execution plan comes in, though, to address all of these issues.
So that's why, I mean, I'm very interested in what comes out of this because I'm wrestling with it every day, but I've yet to find commonality other than what I've thrown out there as what do all these have in common? Well, they all have phases in common. They all have responsible parties. They all have information someone's responsible for. Whether it's the same on one project to the next, so far it hasn't been. You know, and how does the data get from one place to another? Where does it get generated? Where does it start? How does it get compiled in the end? Has been the real challenge of all of this. Is, again, when you get down in the weeds with all of this, and all of a sudden, you know, well, I don't have any ability to do that, or I've never had to do that before, or I have no fee to do that.
Seems like you talk about other people, like that often doesn't happen. Starting with your goals in life, right? What are you trying to accomplish? Because data, you give them COBE data to many an owner, they get the spreadsheet, they don't have no clue what to do with it, they don't use it. Great, you spend a lot of time filling it out. But if you could discern what was of value, even though there may be additional effort on somebody's part, worth it because you say, look, it will improve this performance or help me with this thing. And often, unfortunately, it's more of a push than a pull. It's, well, here's what we're going to do. We'll just give you a whole bunch of stuff at the end versus let's start at the end, work going backwards.
Yeah,
build the process.
It has to be need-driven, need-driven.
Which rarely is.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things I was thinking about was whether instead of, well, Lou, or in addition to what we talked about with the execution plan, what if you had a tool you could give to owners to sort of map out their goals, and then for a project, and then help them sort of walk through the things, the model uses, with some idea of gauging the ease or complexity of actually delivering it. Again, we get it all the time. We're going to do BIM, great. What does that mean?
What is it?
And we have this free-for-all, everybody trying to scramble to show off some cool thing, and again, it's not aligned with any sort of goals, but if you started with a goals, and you give a tool for owner to start thinking through. Okay, if I can ask for I don't know rendering visualization videos that I could ask for 3D printing of things, laser scanning, but if there's some measure that, oh, by the way, in doing that, it's not that easy. It's, even if the pick up order scale 1 to 5, that's on the high end of hard and costly. They'd say, oh, well, give it that. I don't need it that much.
It just would have been nice, but I wanted to.
Yeah, it gives them the ability to.
I sure don't want to pay you for it.
Well, but again, in look at it, they don't. You think about the owner, not getting the technical aspects of it. They're not experienced. They don't know how to judge. If I want or if I don't want. I mean, as architects, we spend time trying to help them make choices all the time, right? But you got to give them some information so that they can get parameters of here's the low end, here's the high end. Is it worth it to you? If it is, fine. Then help them make decisions. There is no good decision-making tool for owners. They have right now. They read articles and say, I want this, I want that. There's no sense of ease.
Yeah, I agree. That would be a huge thing if you could figure out a way to ferret out the back-end process so that it could then inform the VEP. Well, that would be immensely valuable.
Yeah. Do you have the hardware to drive it? Do you have the software? Do you have the personnel? Those kinds of.
But I'm even thinking more like with Georgia Tech. We kept hearing, well, you just want this stuff. And finally we said, okay, well, here's a list of stuff, right? Because we couldn't get anything from your physical plant guys. So we said, okay, here, all right, well, here, we're just going to take a shot at it. You want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? And it turns out it was like, I don't know, 50 items, and they wound up saying yes to 17 of them. Right? And then from that, we could take that and fill in some more granularity.
But it doesn't have to get that too, it's probably dangerous to get too deep and scientific. It's more just broad brush, We can all probably agree that some things are more, some technologies or processes are more mature than others, they're easier than others, they're not as costly as others. We said here, just, I don't know, scale 1 to 3, 1 to 5, whatever. It's hard. And at least it gives some sense, even if it's not, you don't have a high, 95% confidence level, you got an 80% or 70%, you got something better than 0. An owner can at least get a sense, look, it's something that's worthwhile, and then it also could help them, maybe part of it is an assessment of the teams that they want to select. So that given them things they want to accomplish, now they've got some questions they can ask their teams that they're hiring. Do you have that capability to do this? Okay, it's sort of simple, not too crazy, but just a little bit more information so that they can judge whether someone's given a solid dance or something that's really there. They really do know how to use the tool, use them well. So a little bit of qualitative assessment somewhere. But if you think about it, we're the owners sort of flying blind. Try the best. Maybe there's a way to help that, because I've not seen anything
That's interesting. It's kind of a dumb example, but it kind of reminds me of the fact that I have 2 small kids, and they really wanted a dog. And they just said, we want a dog. We love dogs, and we really want a dog. It's like, do you know what it means to have a dog? Like, when you need to have, be able to feed it, be able to take care of it, all this stuff. It's like, you have to know the your capabilities of having a dog, the responsibility, everything involved in it. So it's almost like, I don't know, I'm just hearing like an owner saying, I want a big model. Like, do you really know what it means? Are you equipped to have one? Do you have the resources and everything to really take care of it?
I often think about that, especially the issue of facilities management. Everyone wants to hand off a model handed off, but unlike an institutional owner, most they have no clue what that means. There's no software. They have no in-house staff to deal with it. So they're going to get it, and they're not going to do anything with it.
Yeah.
But yet, throughout the whole project, they're pushing, like, I want that model. And you get to the end, and like, what are you going to do with it now?
Yeah.
Like the dog that caught the car.
And we did get the dog, by the way. And I'm the one taking care of it.
You knew that was going to happen.
Right, yeah. I'm the one taking care of it. So I think, I'd like to think that Georgia Tech had a clear vision of what we wanted, but maybe because this was the first, like I think the EVB project was the first one to go through the standard. The standard was kind of brand spanking new when it came out. But I think we had a good idea, but it's more on the general level. Like, well, we want it for Juan to do the in-house, use it in-house to do any renovation projects, and then we want this guy down the street to use it for the Kobe. But I think, for example, I think the Kobe thing, the guy down the street, I personally don't even know who that is. Like, the people up above me in facilities supposedly know, but I have yet to really know. Okay, so that's one funny thing. But other than that, I mean, I think we thought that this stuff could work, but then one time we heard, wait, the contractor's model isn't even Revit; it's a Navisworks model. What? I thought everybody was working on the same platform here, or something like that. So it's just those kinds of things where I think we have a good idea of what we want, but maybe it's really hard to actually get there, and that we've been working that out.
Right. Well, that gets down to capabilities of the different parties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had another client call me and said, Sam, I'm thinking about requiring Kobe sheets, and he sent me a list and said, what do you think? Is this a good list of Kobe stuff to get? And I go, I was like, well, that's about the longest Kobe list I've seen yet. Why do you want all that? And I said, why do you need a specific Kobe list that's just the warranty? That's in the component Kobe list. I mean, it's like a lot of these are sort of just duplicative. It's like, have you even looked at these and know what's in there, even know if you need these? And walking them through it, it's like, oh, well, 4 of these I don't really need, right? You just saw a list of them and grabbed them. And then the rest of them, like, so what are you going to do with any of this? I don't know. It's like, so why are you requiring something when you don't even know what you're going to do with it yet?
Because they want to have the opportunity to use it for whatever they want in the future.
Right.
They want to like have an insurance plan for the unknown in the future. That's the point.
Right.
And all their owner buddies have it, so.
They went to a seminar. They heard people talking about it.
Yeah, that's very true. They hear buzzwords like BIM and things like that, and they're like, well, they want to have that too. Everybody has that.
That's what I did in the question. Like facility managers versus the guys that are out, in actually the field doing the work in the trenches. So those guys are, the guys with the keys on their belt and they're running around with paper. I mean, just even getting them electronic documents is amazing, and getting them open on a computer is amazing. That's another Kobe can. Those guys.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it has a huge potential, huge promise. But right now, the puzzle pieces aren't connecting very well from one, from one stage or one phase or one piece to the next.
Well,
Sorry, guys.
no, you can go ahead. I was sum up
It
something.
seems that helping owners define what they want is a series of education, combined with seeing what their current capabilities are versus what their, corporation, what the corporate goals are in the future. Being able to really come up with a list, and I think that gets back to what Jim was saying about creating some sort of tool where they can actually have an education, but which they can actually take at that point and then give it to someone that's in facilities and say, put it in front of them and see what the guy with the boots on the ground actually needs. And so then you could have combined those two together. Then you have a much better understanding of what, as a contractor or an architect, we're going to have to buy.
And sometimes some element has been there again is sort of allow the cost-benefit analysis to be done. It's like picking curveballs. So you don't just throw a whole bunch of things out there and don't tell them what it's going to cost or have sort of sketch. I mean, we had a lot of information to help an owner make a good decision. If they want that nice curtain wall, fine, but they got to know it's going to cost X. But if you want, so it's the same thing with this. If you want that, that's fine, but just so you know, it's going to have some element of a premium versus this thing. Because otherwise, it's getting so hard without that context to make a decision gauging the cost benefit. So that was a little tricky, but again,
Well, what we've been talking about for a little while almost falls in the boilerplate section of most BIM plans, where you get the disciplines that are involved, and then you all get together. And this is kind of taken from the Penn State thing, where you have a matrix goal, a matrix of goals for everybody. So you list people, you list the goal, and then what I'm gathering from everybody else is maybe you should also have a list of consequences or something, or or a list of what it means to somebody else. Say if your goal is to have Kobe data, then there's another column that says that means the architect has to have X. Or in this particular matrix, there was a software component because some of the goals required specific software. And I guess the other thing that falls within this realm is requirements. And if the owner has requirements, then it's a goal. You know, it's all how you word it.
One thing I've found is these are fine, the goals, but then it almost needs to, you know, to use the example you just threw out there, we have a goal of obtaining COVID data. Well, then that needs to trigger a whole other section,
Right.
and then starts to define what that is. Because
Sure,
that's
yeah.
going to be a whole multi-page section of what
Well,
COVID data is.
I think that's why it's good to have this in the boilerplate opening section, because that opening section really just serves the purpose of getting everybody in the same room to start talk about it.
Well,
And then the rest of the event plan kind of lays it out.
I agree, but I think it should be, the development of this should be a series of conversations, starting with whomever's going to be managing the MIM execution plan with the owner, and starting, okay, so you want a model, why? And that's going to trigger, okay, I'm going to need this, this, and this, and that's going to drive, when I get together with the rest of the design team and general contractor, okay, the owner wants this, so this means that we need to get here. How do we get here? And you start populating the database that way. I'm thinking about how to get this done. I think it would be a database and just reports on it. If you want this kind of report, fed by the same data, fed by the same fields. But I think what we need to do is come up with a series of reports and end up saying, okay, so what are the fields that we need to fill? And that way design a database. And that way you can, document can be live from starting a conversation with the owner, and then conversation with the design team, conversation with the contractors. And you start putting together
a matrix of choices and that lead to other spreadsheets or things to fill out. Yeah, one thing that would really need to be in here too is plan time to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Plan 3 to 5 meetings to talk about what data do you really need.
Right.
Plan 3 to 5 meetings to discuss, you know, whatever it is. Once you drill down to those several goals and objectives you're trying to get out of it, you know, if energy modeling is or something, drill down to discuss what that means and what software is going to be used and in what phases, and is it really needed at every phase.
And how the information is going to flow.
And how's it going to flow, and who's going to be responsible, and who generates something that gets handed to somebody else.
The architect needs to feed the geometric information, needs to get fed over to the mechanical engineer, and is he the one doing
right,
the energy modeling?
And that's the part that's really missing. It's like a lot of these say, yeah, we want to go with energy modeling, or we want to go with COVID data, or we want to, but then none of these ever take it to, well, let's take that slice, man, and develop that into its own plan as to what that really means, what's involved. Because a lot of these things chew up time in a hurry.
Right.
So maybe our pick of chapters really come from the goal matrix. So if you have a goal for COVID data, then you pick.
But having a lot of teaser goals there would help people, because a lot of people look at that and go, I don't know what goals I want. I just, you know, the goal becomes, you know, a well-modeled BIM model. You know, well, of course everybody wants that. It's not helping me.
And educating clients and stuff like that, and training, if everybody knows that needs to happen, but maybe that's not within our scope here.
Well, no,
Or
it
take it upon yourself,
may
or-
be, because you ask them, you want a model, why?
Yeah.
Why do you want a
Don't know
model?
why. Here's some reasons why you might want it.
So you can use it for this, you can use it for this, or you can use it for this. Oh, in my organization, I don't have that. So I don't use. I really don't need that. Or I'm just gonna design, build this, and I plan to sell it in 5 years. So by that time, I don't care about facilities management. That's my business model. So that objective is not mine.
So then in that case, then that would be shorter and sweeter and more concise, and you wouldn't be filling out these other things if that wasn't part of the plan.
It would be
trying to wade through it if you didn't need to.
Right. So you educate, I think you educate the owner by showing him that he's got the answers. He's got the information. It's not coming from you. It's not you teaching him. It's like, oh, okay.
I mean, it's not unlike, I think, programming for a building, like when you're interviewing the client about what spaces and what square footage, and people have a vague idea of what they want, and you kind of hone that in. I mean, it's like a separate interview process for what your end deliverables need to be in terms of BIM. You know, I mean,
What also might be nice from this group is to come up with a list of consequences from what the things that they want, so that when you come to the table with an owner to educate them, he says, I want Kobe data, that you can say, this is how much time it's going to cost me, and therefore, you know, according to the BIM roundtable consensus, this is how much time it's going to cost me.
It's an X% premium.
Right, so I'm going to put, you know, an ad service for it or whatever.
It requires 0.5 hours per 1,000 square feet.
For one bit of data.
Some kind of unit to put it together. But I think you approach it from both ends. You approach building the database using the framework of the inputs and outputs that we had, and the reports you generate from the database, you generate from the questions and start from the goals and going back.
And then I think there's also another part of this that we haven't really discussed today, and that's the owner wants nothing, right? There's still probably things that we internally would benefit from. Like when Jason and I have a structural coordination meeting and discuss, you know, copy monitor and work sets and, you know, stuff that's just beneficial to our own internal workflow process, whether the owner wants it, he ever sees it. So there's maybe an aspect of that in the BEP as well. You know, things that you would discuss with the owner, but other just internal coordination things that are worth being part of the BEP. Because I could see us doing a BEP that's just the architect and his consultants to help streamline their workflow, and it never even go to the contractor or the owners.
Right.
And so there could be that series of questions that would generate those types of workflow questionnaires as well. And, you know, there are work sessions that Jason, Kathy, and I have had just on those subjects. So
I think that's what stemmed the whole idea of there needing to be some aspect of this that, you know, that sort of touched every, you know, multiple situations, not just like some big, you know, overall theme, because there are so many projects that is the case. And that's how, as the, you know, 90% of the time, you know, we are working for an architect, you know. And so our execution plan has been developed, you know, over a period of time, but it's all those different things that we've run into just with an architect, and that's how ours is written, essentially. So that piece of the execution plan can be developed from that consultant with MEP, structural, you know, whoever. And that's like a sub-piece of the larger plan if you do need it for, you know, other entities. But
those are just small little slices. And while we are wrestling with this bigger sort of issue, some of those smaller little slices might be easier to grab and wrestle to the ground quicker.
Something that comes to mind when you start talking about internal BIM execution is, you know, we talked about BIM execution as it comes down to a contract and a deliverable and educating a client. Then you also come down to the internal ones where you have to educate your team and the coordination efforts that have to take place between consultants, and educating the person that's actually creating these components and inputting the information into these components is a huge deal. And the level of sophistication that needs to get to is very important as well.
I think that that was covered in the inputs and outputs we got, that we documented before. I think while we go through this entire process, publishing and documenting the amalgamation of the previous process and presenting that would be very helpful for everybody, to educate everybody. And if we go forward with developing this big database, it'll be easier. People will understand better how the database works or why is it asking this, because, oh, it stems from this. But yeah, we did have that. It was huge.
So I'm participating for the first time. So.
Oh, I'm just letting you know that actually has been done. We sat on. It was a large meeting. We sat on, and everybody from the electrical subcontractors to the structural subcontractors and the designers and the architects and contractors got together and picked out per phase what they need, what they output, what they generate, and the information they need from everybody else to get that accomplished. And it was very interesting. Honestly, I haven't seen it in a while. So we put it next month. This big flow chart, and it shows how the information flows.
It's on the website?
Honestly, no, it is not.
Oh.
I'm going to have to look. Chris more than likely has that somewhere. I'm going to have to scour it.
It's the next one.
I can send it to you. I've got it still.
Okay. Yeah, if you can forward that to me, and I'll put it up on the website.
I mean, does anybody see it as one day, you know, as a contractor design team owner, we basically have a platform that we can, you know, we all sit on our iPads and we basically log in as a contractor or an architect or an owner and we have a series of questions, answer, you basically fill out everything you want. I guess, you know, you can have a little bit of information, but just, you know, a little bit of information about what's going on in terms of complexity. So you can assign values as to how complex things are. But then as you start to fill out those details, I guess you can either get a field that actually develops and makes more question and answer, or maybe it just has an input, has an output at the back end that then outlines everything that would be required in that execution plan and an overall complexity of what it is. Because we all know we need different things. We all know we have a ton of questions that we need to ask. But the questions for the maintenance guy and the questions for the owner are two different sets of questions. And because the owner, you need to know what they want to do now, what they want to do in the future. What the guys are doing now, that they basically have all the data that they can fill out as to what their systems need. And then the owner would be able to just help define what data points I need in the future. So, I mean, this whole idea of taking this very, very, very complex question and tying it down to something that's more simple and holistic so that the understanding is there at the beginning.
That would be the ultimate goal.
The ultimate goal. Because, you know, we can go down in detail all day long. But without understanding those simple questions up front, without that education being there. Because, I mean, you talk about walking around with our iPads, you know, an owner can sit there and basically be educated as to what each different system is without us as a GC sort of having to try to define that for them.
I think what you're talking about fits in with the same idea of having goals or requirements or requests or whatever uses, whatever you want to call them, from the owner. So you have different severities of that goal. So if it's, again, Kobe data, I keep going back there, but it's good buzzword these days.
The little pops on your head.
Yeah. So you check the Kobe box. You know, maybe you're sitting there with the owner and you're on your iPad and you check it. Well, then it can bring up links to explanations to what it is, requirements that will be needed to get that from whoever is involved, and then maybe
you can have it even a list of people responsible for inputting that Kobe data.
Yeah, inputs and outputs of the Kobe data.
Steps of the process.
What the owner could use it for. So you organize it by goals, and then according to that goal, you know, and we're kind of straying away from the idea of putting it into a BIM plan, but it kind of this seems more useful than BIM plan.
Because without understanding what the goals are, the BIM plan sort of becomes less efficient.
Yeah.
In the sense that we end up putting things in there that we don't need to necessarily. We don't know what we're going to use it.
But that's the whole point, is you have this conversation, you have the conversation back, start the conversation from the goals. So by the time you meet with everybody to flesh out the BIM execution plan, you know which questions you're asking, you know which...
You know the problems.
You know the problems, you know who the players are, and you start inputting the data and assigning people.
And it also has the potential to work like a tree, because that's the other problem is the complexity of this. So you have the potential, starting with some very broad things, like, do you want to use BIM? Yes. It expands itself. So that way it's not so overwhelming. And
Well, a lot of the complex things, maybe they're just a series of attachments so the plan itself isn't overwhelming in and of itself. Still is fairly manageable, and all the detail is just handled by attachments or appendices, and you grow those as you need to. That's what we've done with yours. Yours is grown with attachments to it as needed for more granularity. So
we've seen that with some of our projects too. Not they tie things on. They'll have like a section that's just the code, the section just the QTO, and then you have to go through and define workflows as in those charts that are specifically for that project. So there are a lot of those very minute questions of, well, whose data is going to who? Those get flushed out in a workflow, and then they can be touched on in a paragraph or whatever of the explanation.
And the attachments works well because sometimes it's easier to talk about something in a flow chart. Sometimes it's easier to talk about it in a spreadsheet.
Exactly.
And so not everything has to be in the same format. It should be in a format appropriate to what it is.
I think in the end, it's really neat to have, once you've had the 2 or 3, 4, 5 initial conversations, it works like a web page.
Mm-hmm.
You go and look at the directory, you go pick out SD phase, and you can go and link to, oh, these are the MEP consultants, okay, and this is, you go to that one, and this is the guy in charge of electrical, and what the concept is, and whatever's flowing, and documentation supporting why I selected this technology over the other, or over other technology, just like that. Sometimes it's a pie chart, sometimes it's a paragraph. That'd be good.
And I've seen VEPs where they try to force everything into a flow chart, and there's 10 flow charts and one's useful, right? Or they try to force everything into a spreadsheet or something. Really should be more flexible than that, I think, and more meaningful as to what it is.
So, Georgia Tech, PhD students, IT guys, database designers.
It's funny because we're actually, we have an IT department in facilities, and we're getting them to do something very similar. I was in a meeting yesterday around the same time where we were talking about a menu of options and things flowing out from there depending on what you choose, blah, blah, blah. So it's very similar, but, I mean, obviously this is what we're talking about yesterday within facilities is a facilities format. It wouldn't be the same people that would probably do something like this, unfortunately, but I could definitely ask them.
Your CS department will have plenty of these.
Exactly. Is there any people you know that are students that could work on something very similar to this? You know.
Yeah, it kind of has to go along with your thesis.
Right. It just can't be your thesis. Yeah. But
Actually, that's a pretty good point.
I'm sorry, I hope I didn't recover a lot of ground you already covered.
No, I think
your input was actually very, very well done, very good.
So far, it's been just really useful. A lot of people put up their BIM plan, and we've just been talking through it. And these kind of conversations have been coming out of it, not only I've found it really helpful. Yeah. Everybody else is explaining the situations that they're going through. But this is exciting to me to come up with a different thing. You know, where we were going before is taking everybody's BIM plan and selecting out chapters from everybody's BIM plan. We're going to make a new BIM plan. But,
Depending where everybody already is.
right. And so
It
even
doesn't
like
matter.
Yes, exactly.
Right, yeah, and then even typing up the agenda today, I was like, started looking at all the BIM plans, like, what are we going to do? Make another one of these? And so I like the idea of this new format, and it seems like minimizing the complexity of it is the ultimate goal. So where you'd have to really start top down.
But while dealing with the complexity at the same time.
Well, I think the idea would be that you provide the framework, the simplest framework, and then you dig down as far as you should be digging down within that framework, I think. You know, but easier said than done.
This is just interesting timing because we've gone through yours and we went through another one and talking to somebody else about one, and I'm looking at these, and half these things I look at and I go, if I were to write this, I wouldn't even want this in here. You know, this really is just a waste of my time. You know, and I'm like looking at all this, go, what's going to be useful? And but yeah, it might not be bad to just sort of reinvent it, maybe a little bit. I don't know. But
there, at least, we're going to explore new territory in this group. We're all familiar with BIM plan format right now.
Well,
we'll learn something out of it.
Well, let's get down to the end of the meeting, and let's go over the. Okay, what do we do next? What do we do next meeting? Because we can continue volunteering. I mean, I'm just saying we can have interesting conversations till the sun goes down. But
well, one thing that I'll put forth, see what the reaction is that there needs to be assignments delegated for a uniform level of contribution, or at least contribution to people. So that's how you get input, that's how you get buy-in, and that's how we're going to collect our wisdom. And that's what we haven't been doing. That's one reason we're going to bring that.
You would need to start mapping out, if you want to do question and answer, you need to start with your, basically your tree, as you put it, of questions, your database of questions and how they all relate to one another. And that's like a whiteboard exercise of, or, you know, write it down on a card, stick it up on a board, write it down on another card, stick it up on a board. I mean, that's sketching it all. So.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think maybe for the next meeting, I think it would be a good idea for everybody to bring in this questions. Maybe we do go through an exercise like Josh was suggesting, where we actually start sticking cards on a board, or maybe somebody has a smart board, or whoever holds the next meeting, maybe they have a smart board, we can just go right for a whiteboard.
If there's a software that I'm not thinking of that would be good for this.
I could look. I can find online. I don't know if anybody knows anything off the top of their head. That was
So what I used before was X.
Xmine,
Yeah. And that's essentially, I mean, what we ended up putting the tree in, and that's free. I mean, it works well. Easy to use.
So if everybody came up with whatever they think the structure for these questions is, nobody, if they can do whatever they want, do different formats, because it'll be interesting to get different takes. And then next meeting will be to actually set up and do a working session to put it on the screen or on paper or whatever.
do you want to start from the end? What would be the owner's goals for a model?
Well, you look at it from all parties. Owner, maybe you want to focus on an owner one meeting and a contractor another, or each one in here who has what does an architect need, what does an owner need, what does the contractor need, what does the structural engineer need, NEP. And we have a pretty wide spectrum, so maybe everybody picks what they would need, the questions that they would ask themselves to define what they would need.
And you could use your internal execution plan.
No, I mean, that's part of what we have with
That's really what we did with the ins and outs.
with the ins and outs. Let's leverage that. What I'm trying to say is not go over the same old ground.
Okay.
And if we are, let's focus on it differently. I mean, because we did put all that information in the ins and outs.
It's hard to format that into one big.
Well,
What format are they in right now?
excellent.
And are they all linked as to the sequential
questioning from one to another?
No, that's the problem, is that everyone has their own questions, and a lot of these questions overlap, and it just ends up being a huge spiderweb. Maybe I agree with what you're saying before, but maybe another solution is to start from an owner goal, which is basically our deliverables. And then it branches out and say if the owner wants a BIM model and a Navisworks model, then under that checkbox, there'll be a requirements link, and under the requirements, it'll say Navisworks, contractor, blah, 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 Revit model, architect, blah, blah, or whatever.
Right, the component of what you want, and then the component of education as to what that entails
What it means
in the industry right now. So then I guess they have the option to, they would select it, you know, then it would say, well, FYI, this is what you're asking for, and I get to be a description of what would it entail, but they're not going to necessarily understand that. So maybe something that's very simple in the sense of what an owner, the 10,000-foot view that they need.
But we can. Well, the thing is, we can. You ask. Okay, let's ask a question just very quickly. The owner wants a BIM model. Why? Facilities management, documentation for further expansion or remodeling. Okay. If it's for facilities management, what do we know is best? What kind of model? What software? What does it have in? And then you start answering the question. Okay, it has that. Or it's a documentation design model that you want to use for. Okay, so you need to use Revit, and you need to. What do you need? Okay, you need the architecture and the MEP and the structural to work together in Revit, so you have this complete model that's going to be useful for you. And from there, build back. Not necessarily just answering the owner's questions of, oh, this involves this. All right, okay, it involves a full design team that knows how to use Revit.
You know, I actually know a BIM coordinator here in town who specializes in databases. Would that be something that we would want to have them?
Yeah, and it wouldn't be the AEC Bonnie Gorman's group, would it? Okay, yeah. She's part of this, and she'd be a good person to talk about with this too. She hasn't been to this for a while, but
No, this is just someone that's with another GC.
yeah. All for it. We do this.
James Chase Clark does a lot of data management for South of Beatty.
The more input, the better. Huh?
He would. I feel like he would know how to go about linking these processes together as far as the next steps go.
Yeah, we can all probably keep all this in mind and branch out to whatever opportunities we see.
So what are you saying for the next time that everybody kind of comes to the table with this list of questions, like a structure of, this is how I would approach the client with these questions?
At the very least, that's something everybody can grasp and is familiar with doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. That's not crazy.
Having volunteers for hosting next meeting. I think the schedule that you've got here works well. That will be March 13th, which is every Wednesday. And we can you guys.
And has it?
I have.
I think you guys went one. I think you were before us last time.
So we can go again.
You want next, and then we'll do April.
Okay, that's fine. And these dates aren't set in stone. Everybody check.
Well, 13th, going to be 4 weeks from today.
I mean, everything can go. I think the only one that I saw that might have gone first
for March, right?
Yeah.
TBS.
Yeah, TBS will do.
TBS was not for April. Are we gonna have? Are we gonna have this calendar on the website, or we? Yeah,
I will create once as since we're actually filling these out. I will create a calendar and then keep it up on the website. So the listener calls, they go, okay, this is the next meeting, and you know,
So what is your website? Oh, there's it.
See, there it is, the X-Mine thing.
Actually, that's the one of the original. We've got a larger one than that, I believe.
Yeah, one that has all the tie-ins of all those in, out, and what definition of what those are.
This is a structure we never inputted all our data into.
No, we've got one.
We
No, we did.
Oh,
Yeah. That's one that Chris sent out as just the structure, and then everyone actually input their piece after that.
So let's right now we're talking about the questions. Jason and I are going to meet and try to organize that and try to reorganize that, and so we can present it. So we can, as part of the conversation next meeting.
I'll find it. I'll send it to you as well. Sam, are you guys on the, I guess we haven't been using LinkedIn much recently. Are you and Kathy, are you on that group? The LinkedIn group?
No, I wrote it down though.
The LinkedIn group? Okay.
I will join after this meeting.
I guess we're just using LinkedIn as the reminders and just posts and stuff, but everything that's coming out of this will eventually go to the website.
Oh, Omar, come on.
I think it's great.
Look at my IT guys. Can't get it to the server. I forgot the password.
Do you guys like having a piece of paper in front of you with an agenda and schedule and all that stuff? I feel like it helps with the organization of the group.
As we get off target, we can redirect her.
I think we can.
It'll record what we talked about in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we can print it for the next couple and then just send it out with a meeting invitation. So
Okay.
people print it and
I'll volunteer to do the next one, or what I thought I'd do is put summary of what we talked about last time in the agenda of what we will talk about. And if it works out, then we can continue with that format. You know, somebody else can do it for each meeting.
Pass it down.
Yeah, pass it down or something.